So did the Fed change its tune? Well, as I said, we were focused on, or the Fed was focused on for the longest time, inflation, getting that inflation rate down to 2%. Never actually got there in the US. In Canada, we've now been below for a number of months. In the US, never got there, now moving higher to 3%. But what is the Fed and the President of the United States and everybody else seem to be changing their focus to? Jobs, job creation. Job creation is a lot slower in the US. And what does that mean for GDP and growth? Well, so far, not a whole lot, because GDP is still on their second reading. Most recently, the US came in at 3.3% for GDP, second quarter GDP. We'll have to see what the first reading on third quarter GDP is. But so far, slowdown in jobs hasn't really shown up in many other places. Our first chart here shows the inflation reading in the US, PCE, personal consumptions and expenditures, PCE, core PCE, excluding food and energy, almost 3%. Headline number, 2.6%. As I said earlier in the show, our next chart clearly shows consumer spending versus GDP, the light green versus the dark green. The light green, doing very, very well. We're seeing consumer spending come down a little bit in the first half of 2025, but people are still spending. Next chart, we saw this chart earlier in the show, which focuses on that job creation and those 2 months that the Fed keeps focusing on, those, revisions to jobs. So has the Fed changed its tune? I believe they have. And I think there's a very good chance, an 80% chance, that they're going to cut rates on the 17th, because I think the focus has now gone from inflation to jobs. And perhaps the Fed is signaling without actually telling us that maybe, just maybe, the new target rate could be closer to 3% for inflation than the 2%. They don't seem to want to admit it. But if you're going to cut rates at 3% inflation, that tells investors, like myself, that perhaps that is the case without saying it. So yes, I believe the Fed has changed its tune and now focusing more on jobs versus inflation. And as I said earlier, this Friday's jobs report will be huge. I'll go a long way as to what the Fed does come September 17th with respect to interest rates.